Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi MineCart, the show that digs up sci-fi that no longer gets or has never gotten the attention it deserves and attempts to bring it back into the light. This episode's candidate might be a little bit on the controversial side, as, judging by its pretty much universal panning, most people would agree it doesn't deserve any light at all. But I personally disagree. I thought it was rather good and thoroughly enjoyed it. Cue title card.
Pixels is a 2015 action sci-fi comedy starring Adam Sandler. And if you're anything like me, or I'm guessing most of the people who gave this movie bad reviews, that's enough information for you to assume that it's not going to be a very good movie. Because let's be honest, ever since the release of the film Click, Adam Sandler seems to have committed himself to the arduous task of constantly reinventing the word terrible with every new movie he releases. But this was not always the case. I remember in the 90s, Adam Sandler's work was consistently enjoyed. I'm not sure that it was critically acclaimed or received very high ratings or anything, but I do distinctly remember Adam Sandler being talked about fondly by people at least through the word of mouth giving his films favourable reviews, and he was definitely, at the time, not, as he is now, constantly the target of jokes making fun of how unfunny he is. There were no doubt even then many people who disliked him, but it wasn't this all-consuming visceral response that he now receives for his works. And I believe the reason for that is quite simple. Adam Sandler's earlier movies, such as Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore and The Waterboy to name a few, were actually genuinely enjoyable. There are probably some rose-tinted goggles involved here, but nonetheless, I still get a giggle at some of the humour even if it is rather childish. And even some of his early 2000 films, such as Mr. Deeds and especially The Longest Yard, were too, themselves, rather enjoyable. They were not genre-defining films that are going to be remembered to history and studied in film school, but they were rather funny, and as comedies, that's all they needed to be. However, for me at least, his movies started to go pretty damn bad around about Click, which I could not even get to the end of, and if you have seen some of the movies I've sat through to review, you would know that I have an extraordinary patience when it comes to bad movies. And Click was not the only Adam Sandler movie I just could not get to the end of. I also, due to how bad they were, could not finish You Don't Mess with the Zohan, Bedtime Stories, Grown Ups, and Jack and Jill, and I haven't even dared to watch the trailer for Grown Ups 2. So when Pixels came out and started to receive bad reviews, I immediately accepted those reviews as gospel. Was this an unfair thing to do, considering that while I did watch and completely hate 5 Adam Sandler films, I also watched and enjoyed 5 Adam Sandler films? Well, maybe. But the issue is a movie with Adam Sandler in it is not just a film starring Adam Sandler, it's an Adam Sandler movie. He has originally, much to his success, and then later on much to his detriment, set himself up as a brand name. And therefore, any film with Adam Sandler starring in it is an Adam Sandler movie, and any Adam Sandler movie is naturally compared against other such films. And unfortunately for Adam Sandler, by the time Pixels came out, the brand name had gone bad. Adam Sandler's track record had gone to the dogs. And not unlike going off of milk for a while after accidentally having a swig from a carton 2 months out of date, people are not exactly rushing to give Adam Sandler another chance. I know for certain I wasn't. But, despite having absolutely no intention of giving this probable train wreck of a movie a chance, it was brought by another person to a movie night, and therefore as a captive audience, and with the preconceived notion that it's probably going to be garbage, I sat down and gave the movie a watch. And, much to my utter shock, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The film is definitely not without its flaws, but its good elements easily outweigh its bad ones. So first and foremost, since it is a comedy movie, and as I said just now, the point of a comedy movie is to be funny, let's first talk about the humour in the film. And, as you might expect, this Adam Sandler film has the sort of comedy that you'd expect from an Adam Sandler film. It's pretty standard and it doesn't really do much new, but what it does do, it does better than it's done for a while. That was a bit of a tongue twister, but what I'm trying to say in this extraordinarily convoluted way is that it feels like an earlier Adam Sandler film and not a more recent one. Some scenes attempt to be funny through awkwardness, but end up just being awkward. Some jokes fall completely flat, but many others actually hit the mark pretty well.
Ever since I found out the Zapruder film has been edited, JFK shot first.
Pixels is by no means the funniest film I've ever watched, or even one of the funniest films I've ever watched, but it was quite funny, and I did giggle several times. Also, I really love the idea of the President of the United States hanging out with one of his jackass friends from high school. I mean, I suppose all presidents of the United States would have friends from when they were immature, and they would probably get together and still have immature jokes and play video games and whatnot. I wonder if Obama still gets together with his high school friends and plays video games. So there you have it. As a comedy, Pixels is at least passable. It has its good moments, and it has its moments where things fall flat. But, however, Pixels offers a lot more than simply comedy. So first up, let's talk about the storyline, because that's something I've seen a lot of people having a go at it for. It's about an old arcade gamer, played by Adam Sandler, who finds himself in the modern world, a world without arcade games, and so, therefore, a world where his talent is completely pointless. He also has a love plot, which at times is super awkward and unbelievable, and at other times it's a little bit sweet. It's your standard Adam Sandler film stuff. It's not great, but it's definitely considerably better than Anakin and Padme. And then suddenly, unlucky for the world, but luckily for him, aliens invade who just so happen to take the form of classic arcade characters. Now, I've seen a lot of people compare this storyline to the storyline of the second segment of Futurama's Anthology of Interest 2 and complain that the storyline is too similar. And while I do agree that the storylines are remarkably similar, I don't really see how a live-action movie that seems to basically be based off of a Futurama episode is a bad thing. If anything, that's freaking awesome. Now, of course, because Pixels is an entire feature-length film and not 1/3 of a 22-minute episode, the storyline is actually considerably more in-depth than simply what I've said there. So moving on from its mere similarities with the Futurama episode, in Pixels the alien threat is responding to a vessel that they received from Earth which contained references to the society at the time that sent it, which was the 80s, and therefore contained references to video games, which were arcade games because it was the 80s. If I remember correctly, we have actually sent out things into space with things from our society in it. I believe it contained a Beatles song in it or something, so provided that aliens hate the Beatles, we could actually be in very real trouble. But I digress. The aliens, not having a concept of video games, mistook the violent confrontation between the player and the game as some sort of intergalactic challenge, and so therefore accepted the challenge and came down to Earth hellbent on its destruction. Although aliens are very far away, so they didn't arrive until 2015. I actually found this plot point quite interesting, and it was pretty cool to see the aliens obeying rules of video games because they thought that was how challenges worked.
Are you asking for a challenge?
They came to Earth willing to play by our rules, and therefore, rather than just wiping out the planet, Earth had the chance to win its salvation by responding in kind, by winning at video games. Is this plot utterly ridiculous? Yes, of course it is. But also, it's an Adam Sandler movie about Adam Sandler fighting video game characters that are aliens, so if you came into it not willing to accept such a ridiculous plot, I'm not really sure what you were doing watching the movie. And so, with the aliens reigning chaos, Adam Sandler's character assumes a sort of Jeff Goldblum in Independence Day role, and is the last hope of humanity to save the day. Now you might ask, why Adam Sandler of all people? Well, the movie actually surprisingly covers this plot hole very well by his best friend being the president, and his best friend knowing he's good at video games. So when video games come to destroy the world, the president is like, well, my mate Adam Sandler is pretty good at them, let's get him in here. It's literally a ludicrous solution to a ludicrous problem in a ludicrous plot as part of a ludicrous movie, and so therefore it somehow works. So let's actually talk about fighting aliens. In this movie, all of the battles are really well done. They are well shot, visually beautiful, extremely exciting, and absolutely chock full of retro video game references. Whoever was in charge of organizing the licensing of characters in this movie deserves a freaking medal, because I cannot begin to imagine how difficult and impossibly stressful it was to organize being allowed to use characters from Capcom, Atari, and Nintendo all as bad guys in the same movie. And this is really a rather divisive point I have to say in this review. If you are a big fan of arcade and retro games, you will probably enjoy this movie, or at least I certainly did, and it was a major part of it. If you have absolutely no knowledge of retro or arcade video games, you might still enjoy the film, but a lot of the humor and excitement will be lost on you. I was quite honestly on the edge of my seat in anticipation, wondering what character would come next, and the fact that they were all characters you know added so much enjoyment to the film. I literally cheered when I saw Joust appear, laughed my ass off at seeing Paperboy kicking ass, and could genuinely not believe how exciting and atmospheric a pitched battle against centipedes were. Seriously, name one other film that has Paperboy straight up murdering a woman. Maybe he should be included in the next Smash Bros. Considering how faithfully and lovingly these beloved video game characters were treated, I'm surprised that the film's not receiving at least some love and recognition for that. And there are literally so many more video game characters in the film than I've just mentioned or that are shown in the trailer. And to just name some of the big names, there's Pac-Man, Tetris, Donkey Kong, Q*bert, and I'm pretty sure the robots from Berserk. They are all depicted faithfully, look fantastic, and are a pleasure to watch. The film is pretty much entirely a love letter to classic arcade games. And considering it also contains a performance from Adam Sandler that resembles the ones he did in the 90s, I would say that if this movie actually came out in the 90s, it would have been an absolute knockout hit. So really, if I suggest this film for anyone, I would say that if you have a guilty pleasure of early Adam Sandler films, or you're a big fan of retro arcade games from the 80s, this movie is absolutely fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really quite unsure why it's received the high level of hatred it has. When it really comes down to it, as far as sci-fi action comedies about aliens impersonating arcade video game characters from the 80s go, this film is the only one. And even if, for that reason alone, Pixels is definitely worth giving a chance.
Thanks for watching. I have been and still am Grim Grindle.